My name is Tivania Moodley, and I am the Director of Feminine Rising, an organization that deals with gender-based violence awareness and mental health advocacy. I am a published author, I am an international speaker, and I'm an activist creating awareness around the conversations that truly matter. When I was 18 years old, I was raped. And it is a story that I had kept hidden for 15 years until I had a failed suicide attempt 7 years ago that prompted me to break the silence and to be able to share my story. I also had the experience of intimate partner violence, so I know exactly what it feels like to experience the physical and the mental and emotional anguish. To say that it broke my spirit is an understatement, and it is the reason now that I am so vocal about truth telling, because I believe that we become as sick as our secrets. So everything that I do is a testament to what I've endured. My entire story is basically a testament to the tenacity of the human spirit. And the awareness that I create and the advocacy that I create now is to that end. So for me, gender-based violence and mental health are directly correlated to each other. And the advocacy that I create now is basically to examine the cause of gender-based violence as opposed to just the symptom. So the work that I do is actually very much based on men's mental health, because I believe that we look at retribution as opposed to restitution. And as a rape victim, that is a very difficult thing to understand. It's a difficult thing to correlate. But I think that when we have to examine patriarchy, as much as it did not ever serve women, it definitely did not serve our men. And when we start having those conversations about redefining masculinity, when we start having the conversations about unhealed pathology and trauma in men, when we start saving our men, we inadvertently save our girls. The work that I do now is very much consultative. So as an international speaker, I get to share my story across the world, which is something that I've done extensively in the last 2 years. I've spoken in probably 9 or 10 different countries. And the sentiment is always exactly the same. People are desperate for truth in its substantive form. And so I start having those conversations that matter. The consultancy that I provide around gender-based violence is not just sharing my story, but finding solutions, and solutions that are going to be sustainable. And that ties in with the mental health work that I do. So going into organizations and having awareness conversations, having workshops around men's mental health, having conversations with men is the starting point. And in that way, we inadvertently deal with gender-based violence. The work around mental health is incredibly big. Men's mental health is a conversation that is incredibly important. The suicide statistics in men are 4 times higher than that of women. Men don't threaten, they execute. And I think the latest barrage of suicides that we've seen in South Africa in men bears testament to the fact that we need to be having these conversations, not just from a mental health perspective, but from a gender-based violence perspective. Because if we have to focus on the unhealed pathology, if we have to focus on giving men permission to be vulnerable, as a rape survivor with the focus on men's mental health, that in itself is actually quite a contentious thing. But I, in my work and in my own healing, have realized that the conversation needs to be around men and men's mental health. I think it's incredibly important to not triage the symptoms, which is what we've been doing, but actually look at the cause if we want to make strides in eradicating gender-based violence. And that means giving men permission to be vulnerable. That means redefining masculinity. That means undoing and unbecoming everything we taught, everything that was a template that we were given about what it means to be a man in this world or what it means to be a woman in this world. In that way, anger, which is nothing more than suppressed sorrow, will be able to manifest in a way that is authentic, as opposed to it being manifested through violence, through suicide ideation, through addiction. Now, we focus so much on the symptoms and dealing with the violence, and we want to use violence preventative tactics to deal with violence. We look at labeling men. We look at focusing on the disease of alcoholism or drug abuse. But what we actually don't do is find out why. Why is somebody acting out aggressively? Why is somebody then trying to suppress all of their emotions and using alcohol or drugs as an anesthetic? Because that effectively is what it is. It's an anesthetic. And looking deeper and having those very hard conversations about what it means to be a man. And in that way, if men are given permission to express their vulnerability, to be able to express their pain, it would not manifest as anger. So I think across every culture, we have a prescribed way that we have to be. There is a model that we've got to follow about what it means to be, in my case, an Indian woman, what it means to be an Indian man, what it means to be a black man. And there is heavy indoctrination. And that conversation needs to happen about, does that way, does that template actually serve us? Or do we need to start re-examining all of those indoctrinations? Do we need to start redefining all of that cultural ways that no longer serve us? In that way, we are then able to have the conversations that we are not able to have. In many cultures, religion plays a massive part in, the roles of a man and the prescribed roles of a man and a way that a man ought to be. And in that way, it becomes incredibly difficult for a man to be able to go to his partner and say, I am struggling, because the man is the head of the home. It is incredibly hard for a man to say, I am feeling sad. And I did a survey quite recently, interviewing probably around 75 men. And 100% of those men that I surveyed across the ages of 20 right up until 65 said they would rather die, literally, than tell another man that they're suffering. So that for me is a stark, awakening of how much of work we still have to do in this space and how much we need to start having those hard conversations with men from a cultural level. And it begins with every one of us asking about whether those things that we were raised with, those belief systems, are still serving us or not. COVID has been incredibly difficult, and I think what it's done is that it's highlighted another pandemic in and of itself, not just gender-based violence, but also the mental health aspect, and predominantly in the cases of men that have lost their jobs, that have lost their businesses, that have to be the sole provider for families, and have not given permission to be able to express their pain. And as women, we are also culturally indoctrinated, where we put all of that pressure on the man to be the provider. I know that in many cultures, that is something that is not even a discussion. A man is the head of the home and the financial provider for everything, and the woman is the one that takes care of the babies and cooks and cleans. That dynamic does not work. It is evident that it does not work with the rates of suicide in men over the last 2 years and the escalated rates of gender-based violence and domestic violence. It is incredibly important that we need to start changing the parameters. We need to start having the conversations around partnership. We need to start reframing who does what. We need to start challenging those gender stereotypes. And in that way, we will find that the statistics of suicide and the statistics for gender-based violence will definitely start decreasing when we start having those hard conversations. I am the South African representative of the Global Mental Health Peer Network, an organization that deals with mental health advocacy by a pool of lived experience experts. So as the South African representative, what I do is create awareness around mental health, having those hard conversations around my own personal experience with depression, and obviously my failed suicide attempt of 7 years ago. What I do now in terms of the work in South Africa is a focus on men's mental health. So having conversations, having workshops, having webinars, starting the conversation around men's mental health and engaging with men specifically around the stuff that is usually hidden, and sparking the conversations through the candid telling of my own story. In that way, we give other people permission to live their truth and express their truth by the fact that we don't come in with cognitive awareness, we come in with lived experience, and obviously we're able to connect with people at that level.